This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
I want to thank you for joining us on a special episode of Real Talk as we endeavor to make sense of what's happening south of the border. The Republican National Convention underway. Donald Trump there, obviously a bandage on his ear for a portion of the opening bits. Johnny, I don't know if you saw that.
I did,
but the former American president wants to be president again. I saw, by the way, I like to acknowledge, right hot out of the gates today, somebody in our live chat yesterday on our previous show, we're talking about the attempted assassination in Pennsylvania. It was on Saturday night of Donald Trump, and somebody writing in saying he's always president. There's no such thing as former president.
That's how you're supposed to.
Sure. Yeah. But he's not the president right now. That's Joe Biden. Donald Trump wants to be president again, and he's there at the Republican National Convention, where it is obviously expected at the end of all of this that we'll have some clarity. We know now who his running mate will be. We know who his pick for vice president is. We see Donald Jr. mixing it up with MSNBC. Donald Trump Jr. Referring to MSNBC in an interview as the MSDNC, the Democratic. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Guns blazing, obviously, no pun intended, from the Trump camp. But today, in this episode of Real Talk, we'll endeavor to make sense of what we do know about that incident on Saturday, how that investigation is playing out, how it's landing with U.S. representatives, talk about the Secret Service, and obviously the implications politically and otherwise. Some calls for Donald Trump to handle this a little bit differently. If you caught our episode, this was on the 15th of July. We talked to Charles Adler, the first episode of every week, presented by Tice Automotive Consulting. Adler believes that we're going to see a different Donald Trump moving forward. And I'm not sure that everybody agrees. You can let us know what you think to talk at ryanjespersen.com. Hit us up in the live chat through this show as well. We're going to take you around the United States. We're going to hear from Republicans. We're going to hear from Democrats. We're going to hear from a Canadian who's doing great journalism down in the United States. And at the end of it, by the time that this episode's through, we hope that we have a bit of a more clear understanding of what's happening, why, and ultimately what this may mean down the road. Plus, we have a follow-up on one of our episodes last week where we talked about Alberta lifting its ban on hunting, quote, problem grizzly bears. We got a great email from Travis that we wanted to get to. And Travis, this will be great for our YouTube audience, supplying some photos that he and his wife snapped themselves. Absolutely incredible work. The talents of Real Talkers never cease to amaze us.
Yeah.
And Travis said, well, you were talking about some of the iconic or the famous grizzlies from the national parks, including Banff, Jasper, and the like. He's got photos of the Boss and Split Lip, and those are two of the iconic ones. Most of these bears are known, the wildlife biologists will refer to them by the numbers, right? They sound like, lines of Mercedes. You got like E350 and E450, but some of them have been around long enough and have endeared themselves to Canadians and international visitors, so much so that they have nicknames like Boss and Split Lip. So we'll get to Travis's email on the Grizzlies and more. Brock writing in on our comments, I won't loop you into this, Johnny, on my comments on healthcare last week, and we'll get to Brock's email before the show is done to let you know right out of the gates today as well. Dr. Paul Parks, who's president of the Alberta Medical Association. Dr. Parks will be joining me in studio coming up on tomorrow's show. That's going to be the 17th of July. This episode is presented by HRO Training. If you're a regular tuner to this show, if you listen to the podcast all the time, you probably caught our show on workplace injuries, on workplace fatalities just a couple of weeks ago. What an eye-opener that was. There's no doubt the safety industry is in crisis, with nearly 3 million workers dying every year from occupational injuries or work-related diseases globally. It's unacceptable. Well, there's a webinar happening on August 2nd that we want to tell you about. If you are in charge of lining up safety or coordinating the management of high-reliability organizations, those are HROs. You're not going to want to miss the webinar, Ensuring Safety Excellence, Overcoming Contractor Management Challenges. Your chance to join Chris Labassiere, CEO of We Know Training, and Rob Stewart. Rob's that applied behavioral scientist that joined us on the show. They're going to be talking about helping organizations develop and project industry-wide culture through better performance assurance, increased collaboration, and mutually beneficial partnerships. You can learn more about it. Again, that webinar, August 2nd at 11 Mountain, 1 p.m. Eastern. Check out hro.training/webinars. We'll link to it in the show notes. That's hro.training/webinars. Your organization can save 20% by using the promo code Ryan20 during checkout. That's Ryan20 when you sign up at hro.training/webinars. Did you see the sleepy Trump jokes that people are having fun with online? Donald Trump appeared to be nodding off during a portion of the Republican National Convention yesterday. I want to give the guy a break on that. For anybody that's grown up going to church, for anybody that's grown up in large congregations and gatherings of people.
It's hard to stay alert.
Especially if you've had a hell of a weekend like Donald Trump has. I saw some photos yesterday that appear to have, he's kind of doing the thing where the head falls and the eyes fall and then he catches himself and wakes back up again. And people are applying the Sleepy Joe moniker that he's given the current POTUS, Sleepy Joe Biden, which kind of fits, to be honest, based on his recent demeanor. Well, people are saying, well, let's take a look at Sleepy Trump at the RNC. But I don't know if it's time to catch this guy a break for now or not, based on what his last 72 hours have looked like. On one hand, it's totally remarkable that Donald Trump is even there. But, of course, that's his brand, to bounce back, to be up on that podium, arguably and probably before the situation was even secure. But this is an opportunity right now, as we discussed with Charles Adler yesterday, for Trump to send a very clear message, and that is exactly what he articulated as he pounded his fist into the air Saturday in Bethel, Pennsylvania, and that is that he will fight, and so that's what he is bringing. That's what he's bringing to the RNC today. We want to bring you some of the conversations that people are having, some of the social posts that are going out there, as we're all sorting out and making sense of what's happened in the United States, our closest neighbor, and obviously a nation whose politics have a great influence and impact on ours, on our politics and on our way of life. I thought that this post from Jeff Jackson yesterday was very interesting. For folks that aren't familiar, this is a U.S. representative out of the state of North Carolina. He's a Democrat. He's served the United States in a military context before getting into politics. And he presented something yesterday in just about 2 minutes that I thought did a good service to everybody. And he'll explain it himself. We're going to roll this in just a second. But he's not dragging politics into this. He says basically, in order that everyone can better understand what happened on Saturday and what's happening since, here's a summary of what we know.
There are a ton of conspiracy theories flying around about the attempted assassination, and rather than tell you what to think, I'm just going to give you all the information I have as a member of Congress who has focused solely on this for the last 24 hours. The shooter was on a rooftop 148 yards away. That roof was outside of the security perimeter set up by the Secret Service, which meant that location was not secure. They did have a counter sniper in place who spotted the shooter before he opened fire and had his rifle aimed at him, which is why the shooter was taken down within 3 seconds of his first shot. The shooter was 20 years old. He used an AR-15 variant registered to his father. They found 2 explosive devices in his car. He had worked full-time at a nursing home and had no criminal record. In addition to wounding the former president, he seriously injured several people in the crowd and killed a father who was using his body to shield his family. Congress has already announced a full investigation, including into the planning and performance of the Secret Service. That investigation will probably be carried out by the Oversight Committee, which is kind of bad news because at least this term, the Oversight Committee has been the most partisan committee in Congress. So we have to hope that this issue gets treated differently. There are a lot of security conversations in Congress right now about the threat of copycat violence and retaliation. One of the unique risks associated with political violence is that it can trigger retaliation and create a spiral. But the truth is, any act of political violence creates an indelible stain on a country. That's why you'll hear from nearly every elected official in both parties condemning this. For the vast majority of Congress, I think this is going to be a moment of seriousness and solidarity. There will be some exceptions. Some extreme members are going to say some crazy stuff to try and get your attention. Please do your best not to give it to them. And please know, this is truly one of the darkest chapters of American politics that any of us has ever lived through. But we will get through it. we can still write the next chapter in a way that makes us proud. We are still an extremely powerful nation and a good people, and our union shall endure as we endeavor toward its perfection. And I'll keep you posted.
I thought that was really good.
That's good.
Yeah, we've got Wise Kyle in the chat, who's one of our regulars and who has sort of like planted his flag, so to speak, on his politics. On the right side of the ledger, says, I like Jeff Jackson, says he'd be a good secretary of the military. I thought he put it in very well into words, saying, you know, every act of political violence is an indelible stain on a country, and talking about how this is one of the darkest periods of American politics that any of us can remember. You know, the assassination attempt on Trump being described, and I don't think that this is profound, I think it's obvious, but being described as the most serious assassination attempt since Reagan, early 1980s, you know, approximately 40 years ago. And that's obviously true, you know, at least aimed at a president, let's say, maybe not against a House of or a U.S. representative or a senator, but certainly against the president of the United States. But it is a remarkable time. I still kind of catch myself, even yesterday, as you and I were talking about this after we do the show, still kind of catch myself going, this is bonkers.
Yeah.
This is an absolutely crazy situation.
I think in this day and age too, it's kind of getting washed over. Like there's already, I'm on X, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, and there's already like, you know, people doing Trump impressions with the ear bandage on and stuff. And it's kind of like, it's just a sign of the times. Like this is a serious thing that happened only a few days ago, and people are already like starting to make memes of it and stuff. But another thing from that video, that building, I don't know why it wasn't secure. Like, again, I'm not, you know, military intelligence, anything like that. It seemed very close. It seemed like a building you would want to
What did he say,
secure.
about 150 yards?
Yeah, it seemed like, but maybe it wasn't directly, because most of the crowd was facing and back, right? This was kind of, if you're on the stage to the right, if you're facing the stage to the left, about 150 yards. But it still seemed like something in the vicinity you would want to at least sweep. But now you can bet that the Secret Service is going to be, I mean, you're not going to be able to get on a roof, like I said yesterday, 10 blocks within
Nor should you be
a
able
rally.
to.
Yeah, you shouldn't have that day for sure.
I thought it was interesting. This sort of reminds me of Cheers, where people talk things out at the bar top. But I went to see a buddy yesterday. Shout out to Darren McGowan, who owns Arcadia Brewing Company in our home city of Edmonton.
Happy birthday, dude.
His birthday yesterday. Just a beautiful guy. And so popped by the bar to just have a pint and wish him a happy birthday. And there's, you know, people sitting there as they do during happy hour, finishing up their day. And what do you think everybody's talking about? Everybody's talking about this. And I said, you know, someone makes the comment similar to you and says, I think that's wild that a guy could get a gun up on a roof, or maybe multiple firearms. The FBI, you know, hasn't been sort of like conclusively ruled on that. And says, and, you know, they can get a bead on, you know, the man campaigning to be president and get shots off, multiple shots off. And then another person sitting there goes, yeah, well, and we've heard, I mean, that this has been divulged to the public that a Secret Service sniper, or an FBI sniper, however it works, anyway, a sniper in law enforcement, had a bead on the guy and had the guy in his sights before the shots were fired. And so they're saying, well, that's how the sniper, the law enforcement officer, was able to take a shot at this gunman and essentially to immobilize him, to take him out within 3 seconds of the first shot being fired. And so then I go, well, don't you think it's strange if he had him in his sights? And again, by the way, we recognize that this is ridiculous. Like, we're armchair sniping here.
Yeah.
This is armchair law enforcement. We have no idea what the hell we're talking about, but there are millions of these identical conversations happening literally around the world. I feel like I've been part of 5 of them already. I'm sure you've been part of them. I'm sure many people listening have been part of them. So I say to this guy, and none of us are experts, but everyone's been like poring over like Fox and CNN and MSNBC and you know, Al Jazeera and the BBC and Guardian, and everybody's paying attention to all the sources, trying to get the goods. And I say, well, you'd think if they had him in their sights, the minute that they see he's got a firearm in his hands, then they would immobilize him. Like, it doesn't seem like you need to wait for him to get a shot off before you take him out.
Yeah.
And the guy says, well, what about right to bear arms? What about right to carry?
Yeah.
What about all the, you can't just go around in certain states and just law enforcement immobilizing people that have firearms because they're allowed to have firearms. Now, I don't know that means you're allowed to have an AR-15 on a roof and raise it toward an individual. Sounds a little bit strange to me. But these are the types of conversations where people are trying to make sense of this. People are trying to wrap their minds around this. How did he get up there? How was he moving around? Why was the witness testimony not taken as seriously as it maybe should have been?
I don't know. And that just doesn't make sense to me. If he had sights on him and he's laying down,
makes no sense,
with a rifle and he's looking through a scope or whatever, it just doesn't make sense that he wouldn't. Or maybe he did. Maybe he tried to alert someone. I don't know. I'm sure over the coming weeks and months, we'll know exactly what happened. We'll know everything. And there's even Biden got on, yesterday and said there's a full investigation. So I'm sure.
As there should be.
Of course.
Of
course. But again, we've only seen Trump behind bulletproof glass, maybe 1 or 2 times. I could see him behind a glass for, the remainder all the way up until presidency. And I could see, I really, Jeff Jackson, what he said there that really scares me is that I thought the same thing when this happened is I could see Biden being unsafe now too, because there could be some sort of retaliation happening from the other side. And I don't want to say the other side is like the right or the left or whatever, but I feel unsafe for political leaders in general who are out in public right now, all the way up until this election is over.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting when you're saying like the other side, or people will say both sides or whatever, there's like multiple angles of approach on this story. Cause I hope that we're all on the same side, which is acknowledging, agreeing, and insisting that political violence is unacceptable, right? I hope we're all on the same side of that. And then moving on from there is where the conversations happen. Into the live chat, Horse Lake Ranch says, they train to make shots at 1,000 yards, but a building at 150 is out of the protective area. Makes no sense to me. I 100% agree with you, Horse Lake Ranch. And then we've got others that are acknowledging, that there are, different videos that are surfacing. Plain Power says a video released from behind the podium. I'm showing one of them on my screen here, Johnny, that says, this just adds more doubt. Plain Power says, I don't know what to believe anymore. People see different angles of an event. I think back to the grassy knoll in the Zapruder film, and I think of, when people see an angle on something and it changes their mind, and folks just want to know the truth. Folks just want to have accurate information about what's happened, and that's difficult in a circumstance like this. But of course, you don't blame the public, especially with so much information out there.
There's actually
everybody's got cameras.
Yeah,
you're going to see different angles.
Yeah, there's a video of an angle of right up close behind the podium and this is a big conspiracy going around right now, that one of the Secret Service guys that, was inside job, because he actually tells 3 or 4 people behind Trump down to the right to get out, to move out of the way just seconds before the first shot is fired. I think he was just clearing the area because they were too close to the stage. But of course, the conspiracy theorists are saying he knew it was going to happen. He was moving, these innocent people out of the way because the rest of the people were in on it. And it's just crazy. But seeing all the different angles is also insane, because you don't know until you're in a situation like that. But I mean, even on the video, it doesn't sound, it sounds like firecrackers or a BB gun, right? So a lot of the people did not react the way I think I would if I heard shots fired. A lot of them were like, just kind of like wondering what was going on. Like I would be duck and cover and run and get out of there.
Well, especially in the States.
Yeah. But then again, I've never been in a situation like
wired
that. So
a little bit differently. Yeah. I don't know. Travis says basically, anybody telling you what happened and why right now is just using this story for their own ideological purposes.
Maybe.
Probably a fair comment. Anybody saying it definitively, that's for sure. Plain Power says, I'm starting to doubt the injury. This says, photos of Trump playing golf the morning after with no dressing on his ear. But then that evening he comes out yesterday at the RNC wearing a pad. I mean, is that suspect? Well, I don't know. I mean, it's like if you're going to appear in court for an injury in a traffic accident, are you going to wear your neck brace? Probably. Let's
be honest. If he had a cut, it was probably stitched up literally like an hour later. But if I'm Trump, I wear that gauze for like the next 4 weeks. That's like a beacon on your head.
Unless
it's
the
like
scar
a badge
looks
of
better.
honor.
Unless
right?
the scar looks better. The gauze pad is kind of The scar is badass.
And And you talking about him being tired. I mean, first of all, we already know it's well known that Trump has insomnia, right? He even says he sleeps 3 to 5 hours a night. So you'd think after an event like this, he probably adrenaline, all that stuff. I bet he didn't even sleep at all. So I do not blame the guy for falling asleep the next day and getting. I would not be able to sleep either if I was shot at. Less than 24 hours, 48 hours before.
Sure. Goose does not like my choice of language, that I think it's, to a certain degree, remarkable that Trump's just right back on his feet, right back on the campaign trail. Guys, let me just say this.
That's
Goose,
what you do.
Let me
You
read
milk
Goose's words. Goose says, earmuffs, kid, says the guy went golfing after the incident. How the fuck is it remarkable that he was somewhere on Monday? Fair enough. I just think, it doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter who it is. Make it me. If somebody took multiple shots at me, one of them hit me in the ear and sent me undercover. If I'm doing anything over the next few days, regardless of who I am, I do think that it's remarkable. But yes, the campaign goes on. It's Donald Trump. This is the fight for the most powerful office in the world. And so there he is. The critics are out regarding how Trump has handled that shooting, that attempt on his life, in particular, reaching out to the family of the man that was killed at the rally. I'm not talking about the alleged shooter. I'm talking about the family of Corey Comparatori, the fire chief who had the fire captain, rather, who had recently retired, who died reportedly shielding his family from gunfire. It's obviously a tragic story. A tweet from Eric Foltz says, 2 people wounded at Trump's rally are still in the hospital. One person is dead. Says Trump didn't visit the hospital or the family of the man who was killed. He went golfing. Nothing more needs to be said. Some criticism here from that Twitter account SOTUS says a remarkable bit of copy. This is some reporting. It speaks for itself. I don't know, Johnny, what you think about this. From the widow of the man that was killed, his wife, obviously at the rally last weekend, her name's Helen, telling the Washington Post that President Joe Biden did try to call her, but she declined to speak to him since her husband, quote, was a devout Republican and he would not have wanted me to talk to him, to talk to Biden. That's fine. But she added that she does not hold the current president responsible for what happened to her family. She says, I don't have any ill will toward Joe Biden. I'm not one of those people that gets involved in politics. I support Trump. That's who I'm voting for. But I don't have ill will towards Biden. He didn't do anything to my husband. A 20-year-old despicable kid did. That from Helen Comparatori, the recently widowed wife of the man killed. Obviously a tragic situation in Pennsylvania. She added, the family has not heard from Donald Trump. So I thought that was kind of interesting. The president reaching out, Donald Trump not reaching out.
Seems strange if you hold no ill will to not take a phone call from the president, especially when he's. Yeah. I mean, he's calling to pay his respects. I don't know. I think.
It is like in any circumstance. Obviously, we've not walked an inch in her shoes.
No.
Number one, she's in shock. Number two, grieving, mourning, brutal, horrific situation, obviously. Kind of interesting, regardless of party, to decline a call from the president of the United States. That's just kind of remarkable.
More divisiveness. That's what it is.
But that's her right.
Yeah, of course.
I do think it's kind of interesting that the Trump camp or that Trump himself has not called. You would think I'm thinking of I feel silly. I'm drawing a blank right now. Was it the Chiefs Super Bowl parade where the gunfire happened? That was right. I'm thinking of the right event, incident, and wasn't it Patrick Mahomes that was in the hospital? Shortly after, seeing some of the people that had survived that the gunfire, and obviously that young mother was killed. But I mean, it's just one of those things where I think that it's common practice or the decent thing to do when something happens, when tragedy unfurls at your event, or it's something that you are connected to, and you are the face of that event, or you are the star of that gathering, to do the right thing and to be there.
I'm sure his teams reached out to her, and
again,
I don't want to say it was a mistake for her not to accept the call. I think the same thing as you. She's in shock right now. She wants to honor the memory of her husband, but I think maybe if Biden called her like a week or two from now, maybe she might answer the call. But I can't see Trump's team not milking this, not after she's grieved, bringing her on the campaign trail at some point, and and talking about her husband as a hero and etc. I think we'll see her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Garth in the chat says some folks are looking for a narrative that fits their political leaning. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is just, it's all twisted up. It's all strange. We don't really know the motivation of the shooter. We know that he was a registered Republican. He donated to the Republican Party, had not yet voted in a presidential election, but it's just like the whole thing is strange. And obviously it makes sense that people are trying to better understand it. I saw this the other day, yesterday afternoon rather, this from a TikTok account, Dana's Inspired is the account. And this clip's a little longer. It's about 3 minutes, but it's a summary. And we kind of went through it. I was going through it, hitting pause, going through it, hitting pause. It's a summary of, really a striking assessment, summary, basically a historical reference, recent history of political violence and violent rhetoric in the United States. And it kind of goes, it's just ticking boxes. And I guarantee this audience, the audience of this show, a hyper-engaged political in-the-know audience, you're going to remember or recognize virtually every single incident that she lists off. But when you hear them back to back to back to back, well, you'll see what I mean. Here's Dana's Inspired.
Well, folks, I tried. I really did. I managed to squeeze out some genuine empathy for Orangina, and I thought I did a pretty good job. And then I made the mistake of looking at Elon's X, and I remembered why the right is not compatible with empathy. And then I remembered Paul Pelosi getting hit over the head with a hammer and mocked by Schlumper and Company. I remembered the image of bound, gagged, and hog-tied Joe Biden that Schlumper tweeted to the world. I remembered the assassination threats against Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and how 1 in 6 election officials have experienced threats because of their job, ranging from death threats that named officials young children to racist and gendered harassment by the right. I remembered MTG calling for the execution of Barack Obama, and Paul Gosar posting an animated video depicting him unaliving AOC. I remembered the far right's violence against minority communities in Charleston, Pittsburgh, El Paso, Buffalo, Jacksonville, etc., etc., etc. I remembered Trump calling for people at his rallies to be harmed, and how he wanted to shoot protesters in the legs. And of course, I remembered January 6, and how all our lawmakers' lives were in grave danger, and our Capitol police were pummeled and traumatized for Trump's adrenaline rush of vengeance for a country that kicked him to the curb. I remembered E. Jean and dozens of women who faced violence at Trump's own hands. And then I caught wind of J.D. Vance and all the wannabe up Trump's ass peanut gallery, who waited about 2.5 seconds before claiming that Joe Biden's campaign rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination. And Representative Mike Collins going one step further, claiming Biden sent the orders. I remembered lock her up and knock the crap out of them, and good people on both sides, and when the looting starts, the shooting starts, and stand back and stand by. And I remembered that between 2013 and 2022, 75% of murders committed by extremists were caused by right-wing extremists, with only 4% caused by left-wing extremists. Of course, I don't advocate, celebrate, or condone violence. That's what the other side does. But I draw the line at feeling compassion for a man who we all know would be making a joke about the shooter having poor aim if this had happened to Joe Biden. I'm not going to go down the road with all the conspiracy theorists, although I find it baffling that his security team is so incompetent. And for the life of me, I don't understand how a man who was just shot at was able to stick his head above the Secret Service human shield that was huddled around him right after the shooting, so he could fist pump the air and encourage his voters to fight. You'd think the folks who are supposed to be experts at protecting the president's noggin would have been a little uncomfortable with giving the shooter a second chance at blowing it to smithereens. Folks, I think we all know what's in store for us. We're going to see the biggest misuse of martyrdom there ever was. We're going to see mediocre men marinating in victimhood, tossing out thinly veiled calls for retribution and dog whistle after dog whistle for MAGA minions to avenge the radical left. Joe Biden will be painted as a cunning force of evil, at least when he can remember where he is and when to take his Alzheimer's meds. It's gonna be torture. Absolute frickin' torture. And instead of talking about the corroborated testimony of young girls who were allegedly violated at the hands of the depraved sociopath who happens to be the Republican nominee, we're going to hear about a cult leader victim who bravely gave the tip of his ear to save racism everywhere. Yeah. Well, all I can say is I'm going to be sure to remember all the folks who feared for their safety because of Orangina Pervalicious Felonious Schlumper McPhee's thin-skinned rhetoric over the years. And I'm going to remind the bad actors that malevolent men don't get to turn victimhood into victory. Yeah.
That's Dana's Inspired on TikTok. So there's an ardent and outspoken Trump critic. And we knew the button this would push with the Trump supporters in the audience, like Vamp Fashions, I have to assume, who on the live chat says, oh, this is sad. The thin veil of decency didn't even last a day. But here's the thing. The point we're making is that criticism is coming from, yeah, you got it, both sides on this, Republicans included. Like, how about this? The former U.S. representative out of Illinois. Did you see this yesterday? Adam Kinzinger, who up until 2023 was a Republican in the House of Representatives. And he went on the record yesterday, thought it was pretty significant. You tell me what you think, talking about the presumable Republican nominee and the assault on democracy. Check it out.
What are we going to here? Sorry.
You know, Adam Kinzinger, Republican representative, second clip, Illinois, green T-shirt.
Yeah.
You got it. Here we go. Check it out.
Now, the question going forward is, how do we, talk about Trump? And here's my answer. The same. Do not let them intimidate us into not going after Donald Trump. Look, every adult knows that in politics, you'll say things like, we have to take Trump out so that he doesn't destroy democracy. They know what we mean. We're talking about November 5th. Trump is a danger to democracy. He absolutely is. This is not the same as calling for an assassination of the former president. And what you're going to see now is the right and Trump supporters attempting to intimidate us against going after Donald Trump. Look at what Trump said after Paul Pelosi. Look at Trump retweeting comments about civil war. Look at Trump tweeting about Liz Cheney in a military tribunal, which by definition I take as a threat against me as well. Let's not let off the gas pedal here. Obviously, if nobody should cross into the area of violent rhetoric, but none of the attacks against Trump that I see from the Democrats and Republicans for Biden has been violent rhetoric. Like, to say now that you can't go after the former president is insane. So let's not let this intimidate us. Let's keep fighting this fight, but let's fight it politically, obviously. I hope, everybody has a good rest of the weekend. I hope you get a chance to see me tomorrow on Colbert, even though it's probably late for some of you. But yeah, it's a very low moment right now. And we'll get through this. But let's keep our heads screwed on right. And I know all of you are, but I'm just hopefully giving you some inspiration to keep spreading the message, because this is important. God bless you guys, and we'll see you soon.
So there you go. Former Republican, I'm sure is still a Republican, but out of the U.S. House of Representatives from 2011 to 2023. That's Adam Kinzinger out of Illinois. Now, that's obviously after the incident on Saturday, talking about that. You notice how he has to check his words. Everybody has to check their words right now. He says, let's continue to fight. Mm-hmm. And then he says, politically, obviously, just to point it out. But criticism coming there, and people unafraid. Like we said, the news cycle moves fast. Talking to Charles Adler yesterday, suggesting that, and several of you have said this in emails to the show already, we've got some of them locked and loaded, ready for the flamethrower presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park coming up on Friday's episode. But talking about how the assassination attempt, will be but a memory, mixed into 1,000 other memories by the time November comes around, by the time people go to vote. And that's probably right, because the conversation is evolving already. The conversation is moving on already, which on one hand is understandable, and on the other hand is hard to process, hard to wrap your mind around. Such a monumental moment, such a monumental time, just passing on, just moving along. Cheryl outside in our chat says, isn't it sad when criticism is coming from both sides for both presidential candidates? Yikes. We touched on this a short time ago, but how about this New York Times, this guest essay by George Clooney Have you seen this one? This is wild. The headline, George Clooney, I love Joe Biden, but we need a new nominee. I would imagine that something like this is difficult for someone like George Clooney to write. He opens by basically saying, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I make no apologies for that. I'm proud of what my party represents, what it stands for. He says, I love Joe Biden as a senator, as a vice president, and as a president. I consider him a friend, and I believe in him. He says, I believe in his character. I believe in his morals. In the last 4 years, he's won many of the battles he's faced, but the one battle he cannot win is the fight against time. George Clooney, the movie star, writes, it's devastating to say it, but the Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser was not the Joe big effing deal Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate. Writing that about somebody that you say you love, somebody that you're a friend of, but he loves his country more, I guess, has to put this out there. He says this is about age. He says it has to be fair to point these things out. Nothing that can be reversed. We're not going to win in November with this president, says George Clooney, and he is 100% right. He says, let's hear from Wes Moore and Kamala Harris and Gretchen Whitmer and Gavin Newsom, and he lists others. He says this will be messy. Democracy's messy. He says, but replacing the candidate could enliven the party, wake up voters who long before that debate in June had already checked out. He says the short ramp to Election Day could be a benefit for the Democrats, not a danger. He closes in the New York Times, if you haven't read it, by saying Joe Biden is a hero. He saved democracy in 2020. We need him to do it again in 2024. Interesting. Pretty striking words from George Clooney. We're going to get to more on this story. I want to bring you some details. We talked a bit about Project 2025, and it came up yesterday. Travis, one of the Real Talkers, had sent us some videos that he says proves that Trump has referenced Project 2025 in past. I want to get to it. Plus, a Canadian, Ali Velshi, who hosts on MSNBC, hosts on CNN for a long time, spoke out on it recently. For the first time, it's getting more traction, and it's something that may be worth a few moments of your attention. So we're going to put it there on this, a school up, a level up edition of Real Talk that's made possible by some of our steadfast and incredible sponsors like our friends at California Closets, who want to let you know that anytime you're even considering getting organized for good, getting decluttered, maybe sprucing up your space with a custom closet or storage solution, the best first step is a free consultation. You can sign up on their website, californiaclosets.ca. You can learn more about how their team can help you make the most of your space, invest in your space in a way that's going to give you not just peace of mind, but also really improve the aesthetic of your number one investment. That's your home. Whether it's a home office, could be a guest room, that dream walk-in closet, maybe it's a wine cabinet, a boot room, or even your garage, California Closets can come up with a plan that'll be custom designed to fit your space and fit your budget, plus everything comes lifetime guaranteed. You can request that free consultation today on their website, californiaclosets.ca. With all this sunlight, these beautiful long days, those of you with solar panels on your roof are reaping the rewards, are you not? Kubi Energy, more and more satisfied customers every single year. Folks that have looked to Kubi for green energy installs on their farms, their office towers, their convention centers, their cabins, cottages, and primary dwellings, their homes. Kubi does it all across Western Canada, and they're currently looking for talented professionals, including ticketed electricians that would love to work in Lethbridge, Calgary, Edmonton, or Kamloops. That's where Kubi's working out of Western Canada's busiest solar installer. You can learn more about opportunities available by checking out the careers link at kubienergy.ca. At Complete Care Restoration, they understand that natural disasters can be a life-altering experience, a total nightmare, whether it's fire or even smoke damage. It could be a sewer backup, a flood. Maybe you found black mold or asbestos as part of a renovation project. Complete Care Restoration has a team of talented and certified professionals ready to respond 24/7. If, heaven forbid, disaster strikes, contact Complete Care Restoration. You can find them under the sponsors tab on our website or go directly to theirs. That's completecarerestoration.ca. And our friends at Friesen Brothers are getting set to celebrate watermelons. Yeah, that's right. Did you see somebody tweet at us yesterday with the special picnic example of what we can do with watermelons and vodka bottles? Now, that's not an official endorsement, anybody, but there's all kinds of ways to enjoy watermelon through the summer, and Friesen Brothers is hosting Watermelon Fest, including welcoming National Watermelon Queen Jules Singley. That's coming up July 20th and 21st. You've got opportunities at many of their different stores to take part in the festivities. Rabbit Hill, Stony Plain, Glenora, Fort Saskatchewan. As a matter of fact, across the province, they're going to be celebrating watermelons, giving you a chance to win $100 Friesen Brothers gift cards. Kids and other participants can get free balloons and crowns. A ton of watermelon specials through the day. Check out friesen.com/watermelonfest. Friesen Brothers is Alberta grown and Alberta owned. Some talk about Project 2025 yesterday as we connected with Charles Adler. I think most folks have kind of a general understanding of what this is, but maybe haven't dug into the details. So we've been doing a little bit of looking into our own, and obviously we have some interview asks. We want to talk to people stateside. They're experts in this, Republicans, Democrats. This is described as a presidential transition project, and you can check out more about it at project2025.org. Though if you're looking for a deep dive into specific details on what this is all about, you'll be left wanting for now. Julia Manchester has tweeted some of the examples of billboards that are being put out by the Democrats about this. This will, or at least this is their intention, for this to be an election issue. And you can see some of these billboards that are going up, including already featuring Donald Trump's choice as his running mate, J.D. Vance. You can see on the Trump-Vance ticket, Project 2025, ban abortion, punish women. Another billboard reads, tax breaks for billionaires, higher costs for you. Another reads, dictator on day one. Another, terminate the ACA, gut social security. So this is how the Democrats are hitting this. And journalists are starting to pay closer attention to it as well. I think as interest from members of the public starts to increase too. Ali Velshi, who's Canadian, by the way, has made a hell of a career for himself down in the United States, out of Atlanta for many years with CNN, and he's got a show now on MSNBC. And we thought that this was interesting, considering the context and considering what we talked about with Charles Adler on our July 15th episode. That was just yesterday. If you're listening to every single day of our shows, we appreciate it. Here's what Ali Velshi honed in on, in particular, women's health access, just part of what he says, Project 2025.
Understand this plan and understand what's at stake, which is why, starting today on Velshi, we are taking you inside Project 2025. Every weekend, every time I'm on TV, I'm going to dig into these pages and parse exactly what is in this mandate. Today, we're kicking it off with abortion and reproductive rights. Abortion is mentioned 199 through Project 2025. The foreword to the entire thing reads, quote, the Dobbs decision is just the beginning. Conservatives in the states and in Washington, including the next conservative administration, should push as hard as possible to protect the unborn in every jurisdiction in America. In particular, the next conservative president should work with Congress to enact the most robust protections for the unborn that Congress will support while deploying existing federal powers to protect innocent life, and vigorously complying with statutory bans on the federal funding of abortion. Later on in the chapter on the Department of Health and Human Services, Roger Severino, a former Trump White House official, wrote, quote, the secretary should pursue a robust agenda to protect the fundamental right to life. From the moment of conception, every human being possesses inherent dignity and worth. Abortion and euthanasia are not health care. He doesn't stop there. On medication abortion, he writes, abortion pills pose the single greatest threat to unborn children in a post-Roe world. FDA should therefore reverse its approval of chemical abortion drugs because the politicized approval process was illegal from the start, end quote. Project 2025 aims to prevent abortion from the moment of conception, which would likely involve establishing so-called personhood rights for embryos and fetuses. It aims to crack down on so-called abortion tourism, instances in which women travel to liberal states to seek abortions. It proposes using the Comstock Act to prosecute people who send abortion pills by mail. It aims to take away most medication abortion altogether.
So there's a portion of it Now, listen, there is, the mandate for leadership, as it calls. And again, you can check out the website, project2025.org, if you want to dig into it. Have you ever, Johnny, dug into something 900 plus pages?
No, I haven't.
When's the last time? Was it War and Peace? When was the last time you got it? Was it the Holy Bible?
Oh, yeah. War and Peace. I did that. No.
I think the Holy Bible's well over 9. I think it's about 3,000 pages,
but
depending on which. But
I have combed through their website, and I've looked at, what Biden's camp has put out about it. I've looked at what they've kind of... People have gone back and forth. Like Biden's camp tries to fact check what they're doing, and then if you go to their X right now, Project 2025 has about my gosh, it's a huge thread. I think it's about 30, 40, 50 different points that the Democrats are saying about Project 2025, where they clarify and say this is false, this is true. I mean, some of them they outright say, like, yes, we want less funding for abortion, we want this and this. Some of the things they're like, no, we are not going to do this or that. But the whole thing in general is, whether the president takes it as his arms and puts it forward, which I don't really know.
So Trump has got on the record and talked about, like we said, like I alluded to earlier, the implications are what people want to know about. What does this mean for this? What does this mean for him? What will this mean for them? And Trump has gone on the record and said, I will have, or I do have a place in my administration for this person, that person, people that are affiliated with this group, with the Heritage Foundation. There have been some sort of and I don't know if this is people arguing technicalities or not. I don't want to sort of brush off or dismiss concern around it, but people are saying,
not at all.
Did Donald Trump know about this? He says, I have no knowledge of it. We talked about this yesterday with Adler, saying that what did he say? There were parts of it. What was the word he used? Like heinous or despicable or something. He says there are elements of it that are heinous, but whatever they're doing, he says, I wish them well, which was kind of a funny quote. But at the same time, people were kind of getting hung up on, well, did he know about this? Has he talked about this before or not? I appreciate the Real Talkers that had sent us emails and follow up to yesterday's show. We appreciate you guys all the time. Talk at ryanjespersen.com. Trump has been on the record talking about the Heritage Foundation.
Sure, yeah.
Whether or not he has gone on the record specifically referencing Project 2025 remains to be seen, but I tweeted this to somebody yesterday. I'm not sure that this is where all the attention needs to be.
No.
I'm not sure whether or not people need to be arguing about whether or not Donald Trump has specifically said the words Project 2025. That doesn't really seem to me to be the point. That seems to be ignoring the forest for the trees, kind of like trying to hone in on one specific detail. But do we endeavor and seek and need to understand more about the playbook? Sure. I mean, like anything else, when there's, and we see this here at home in our politics as well, right? I mean, like, how about our conversation with Take Back Alberta's David Parker, for example? When something is happening, when a group is mobilizing, gaining momentum, selling memberships, building its base, influencing politics, influencing politicians, we should probably learn more about that group. We should probably seek to understand more about what that group's politics or end game would mean for us, right? And so that seems to be obvious to me, and that's what we'll continue to look at, continue to work on. Adler yesterday, with one particular comment, and you opened the short with this, I noticed, I thought kind of flew under the radar. And I don't know if he meant it in the way that it came out about somebody up there, about somebody upstairs, about the grand poobah, the supreme being, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Of course.
If you didn't catch Adler on Real Talk on the 15th of July, this was our first episode this week. Why don't we do this? This is 60 seconds or less, a portion of our exchange with him. But the very first thing he says, I went, whoa.
Everything changed on that Saturday in Pennsylvania.
Take a look at what happened.
Somebody up there wants Donald Trump to be president.
Yeah.
Something in Donald Trump's performative brain clicked, and he became the director and producer and star of his own reality show. That's tough to beat. It will not be difficult for him to attract voters, rally participants, and most important, money.
Johnny, how are you wrapping your mind around all this?
No matter what you say about Trump, he's a smart guy, and he knew to not just fall on the ground and get off the stage. That getting up and that fist pump, those pictures we saw, that's going to be a part of history forever. And I think that one picture, this is his ticket right to the White House.
Yeah, pretty wild. Just 1 month ago, we're doing a show here talking about whether or not the GOP needed to dump Trump after the convictions. Now it's basically the ticket to ride.
What do you think? Is a Trump victory guaranteed?
Somebody up there wants Donald Trump to be president. I thought, oh boy, here we go. And that's what Trump himself is saying, of course. We encourage you to give us a follow on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter. That's where you can check out our YouTube shorts. If you follow us there as well, we sure appreciate you subscribing to our YouTube channel. Every day we do our best to take a significant moment, a noteworthy moment from one of our shows to boil it down to about 60 seconds and to give you an idea of what you can expect in that episode. Makes it easier to share as well. In 30 seconds, I want to get to an email from Travis. This about grizzlies, following our conversation with John E. Marriott, the wildlife photographer, and Sarah Elmeligi, who's the Dr. Elmeligi, who's the MLA out of Banff, Kananaskis, and a bear biologist. Some developments in Alberta politics when it comes to problem bears, problem grizzlies, and how the province intends to address them. Before we get there, though, a quick reminder, if you missed our episode on the 12th of July, that was Friday, an interesting and engaging debate with Aretha Van Herk, the author, and with Camille Labchuk, the animal rights attorney, on whether or not we should ban rodeos. And you may be going into this with your mind made up. I'll be honest, I think for the most part, I planted my flag ahead of it. I'm a big fan of rodeo. I recognize that not everybody is. And I know a lot of you inherently and adamantly believe that rodeo should be canceled. But if you missed that episode, it's a great back and forth. The two participants, as far as I'm concerned, arguing in good faith. There were some tense moments, which I thought was made it even that much better. But I wanted to remind you that that conversation was prompted by the dialogue feature in Alberta Views magazine, which is a monthly, in every issue, they present it, an opportunity to take a big question, put two informed voices head to head. They open with a short essay on their position. In this case, the question, should we ban rodeo? And then each author or each participant gets a chance to respond to the other participant's initial take. It's a great way to do it. It's a great way to keep discourse civil, focused, and as far as I'm concerned, intelligent. And we encourage you to subscribe to support independent journalism by checking out albertaviews.ca. The promo code AVRJ will knock 50% off a 1-year subscription delivered to your door. That makes it $20 at albertaviews.ca. If you missed the news, the province of Alberta announcing it's a ministerial order, essentially, is what it was. So it kind of flew under the radar. Minister Todd Loewen indicating that the province intends to deal in part with so-called problem bears, problem grizzly bears, which are bears that have had interactions with humans or livestock, bears that have become acclimatized, that are food motivated, that are entering urban dwellings, mountain towns, as an example, that hunters will have an opportunity to hunt these grizzly bears. There's been outcry ever since this ministerial order was unearthed, and so we went to two expert voices. First, we want to play you a quick clip before we get to Travis's email. Travis wrote into the show. John E. Marriott joined us. As far as I'm concerned, and his record and his professional repute speaks for itself. One of the most renowned wildlife photographers, certainly in Canada and probably around the world. John Marriott has done a ton of work, in particular talking about the sustainability of the grizzly population in BC and in Alberta. And while I encourage you to check out, this was about a week ago, the entire interview that we did with him, here's a quick synopsis of what he had to say about this decision by the province of Alberta.
It's like we've stepped back into the early 1900s or something, and suddenly everybody's supposed to be arming themselves with guns, and we're going out there and we're killing all these problem bears that are, trying to kill us all. And it's just some ridiculous rhetoric that I just simply don't agree with. And I think the majority of Albertans can really see through this and see that all that Minister Loewen is really doing is he's providing opportunities for his cronies to get out there and kill some grizzly bears, which they've been wanting to do for decades now.
So that was John E. Marriott. He talks to us in the top half of the show, and then we're joined by a bear biologist who happens to also be the member of the Legislative Assembly, the MLA for Banff Kananaskis. So she comes at this as an opposition MLA and as a bear biologist who's worked in that space for 15 years. Dr. Sarah Elmeligi talked to us about what she thinks is the proper way to manage the grizzly population.
Of course, it's always really, really tragic anytime somebody is hurt or killed by a bear, whether that's a grizzly bear or a black bear. But, you know, our relationship with bears goes way, way back, like to the 1800s, or even further. Indigenous people have relationships with bears on this landscape since time immemorial, right? And, you know, for us, a lot of that relationship can be based on fear. And so when we talk about coexistence with bears or our relationship with bears, and this is why I wrote the book, there's always the bear's perspective, but the human perspective is equally as important, because if we're reacting from a place of fear, we may be more quickly to land on aggressive management options. But if we can take a step back and react from a place of trying to understand the bear's behavior, we might see that other management options could also be effective. So I think, you know, grizzly bears have a really hard time making a go of it on the Alberta landscape. There's a lot of reasons for human-caused mortality, whether you're talking about highway mortality or train mortality. We also do a lot of things on the landscape. We alter grizzly bear habitat in a lot of ways, and that can also lead to mortality of grizzly bears. So poaching deeper and deeper into the backcountry, for example. And then, of course, there are the odd occasion where a grizzly bear has engaged in really damaging conflict behavior. So that could be, you know, harming a person or, you know, killing a bunch of livestock like we saw with sheep earlier this year. And in those rare instances, Fish and Wildlife officers do euthanize individual bears. But as John said, that's really on average 2 to 3 bears a year. So it's not creating this like crazy onerous capacity issue for Fish and Wildlife staff that they need the public's help to start managing and euthanizing bears on the landscape.
I was really impressed with what she brought to the table. You know, like I think it would have been easy for her to come in guns blazing, make it all about politics, throw hand grenades at the premier's office, throw hand grenades at that ministry, at Minister Lowen. Do I need to start being more sensitive about the phrasing that I'm using and the words and the political euphemisms I'm using? Maybe. You get the idea. But she came on it, in my mind, first and foremost, the context as the MLA for the mountain parks, for Banff Kananaskis, for that beautiful part of southwestern Alberta. But then talked as you would expect, right? And approached this as you would expect from a bear biologist. And I thought it was a really valuable interview. If you're looking for more insight into that, this is the July 10th episode of Real Talk. The title of that episode on our podcast or YouTube archives, Alberta Lift Span on grizzly hunts. If you have another perspective on this, if you're coming from another angle, if you're, for example, keeping livestock, if you're a rancher, if you're living out in more rural areas, and you have a different perspective or maybe a take that you haven't seen represented in public discourse, we are always only an email away to talk at ryanjespersen.com. And of course, we'd love to hear from you there. That's exactly where Travis reached us. Do you remember Travis Curra? He joined us. He's the host and producer of the 2 and Out CFL podcast. Johnny, you remember this?
Yeah.
Remember he joined us on the show after we had a group chat roundtable?
I just watched it yesterday.
Yeah, did you really?
Of course,
and,
with everything going on.
Our friends in the group chat roundtable, Jared Campbell, I think, and Harmon Candola were here in studio, and they were basically declaring the death of the CFL, talking about how the CFL's got huge problems, it's not sustainable, and Travis, who's a steadfast supporter of Real Talk, reached out and was basically like, you guys don't know what the hell you're talking about. And we had so much fun talking to Travis, and we sure appreciate knowing that he's a member of our listening audience. Well, turns out he's also a wildlife photographer, and he's a real nature lover, and he wrote us this email. His name jumped out of my inbox. I recognized it right away, talking about Alberta's grizzly hunt. He says, Jespo, I watched that episode with John Marriott, with Sarah Elmeligi, first thing in the morning, and I'm so grateful that Real Talk is covering this story, even though it's a bummer topic. He says, we've actually got 4 of John Marriott's books on our shelf. So as amateur photographers ourselves, Travis and his wife, he says it was very cool to hear his voice on Real Talk. Yeah, Travis, I thought it was pretty cool too. He says the most shocking part about this story is the lack of consultation, the sneaky way that this new policy seems to have been implemented, and the fact that it's actually 2 to 3 bears on average annually that would qualify as problem bears, 2 to 3 on average that end up being euthanized every year in Alberta instead of claims of over 20. This is a brutal way to add some pennies to the provincial coffers. Travis says the policy as it was needed to be improved anyway. And in a place, Alberta, that's supposed to have a grizzly bear recovery plan, why is the rehabilitation of orphaned cubs still outlawed? He says, now it just feels like we're going backwards. And by the way, for those of you watching on YouTube, Johnny's showing you photos. These are photos shot by Travis and his wife. These are absolutely stunning. He says, I follow politics and I consider myself informed, honestly, thanks to Real Talk, but nothing fires me up quite like when the government decides to fuck with the Rocky Mountains or wildlife. Then he says, and I'm glad a show with a platform like yours is covering a topic like this, because most of the time we hear about the amazing predators, these apex predators that call Alberta home. It's usually attack stories that just cement the fears that people already have. And we need to be able to live alongside these amazing animals, not cull them like wolves. He says it's clear that you have a love for grizzlies as well, Jespo. So here's some images, and we've been showing you them on screen that my wife and I have captured this year, including a couple of the boss, split lip, and 3 beautiful bears from Jasper. That from Travis. Thanks for sharing, brother, and we appreciate your email. Also, I think it's interesting that he says we shouldn't be culling them like wolves. The minute that we even touched on the wolf cull, which is ostensibly to protect caribou populations, it fired up in the live chat. And we do want to let you know that there's some momentum behind the scenes. We're talking about a bigger picture, sustainable wildlife management roundtable. We're going to bring on 2 or 3 really smart people and get into it. It's not just bears we're talking about here.
I know. It's all like I said this before. I think management is a funny word to use for it, because as soon as you call one population, the other one goes up, then you got to call them. And then it's just like humans intervening in this whole thing. But that's life, because we're on their turf.
100%. Justin says, what's to stop hunters from baiting bears to incentivize them to become problem bears? I mean, how do hunters know they're shooting the right bear? What are the penalties if this is ignored?
Well, the bears with
questions.
With the bandanas and the spiked bracelets. Those are the bad ones.
Yeah, exactly.
The guys with the attitudes.
The bears with wallet chains and white sunglasses. Those are the problem ones. You can see them from a mile away. This isn't a sports show, but speaking of the CFL, Travis's podcast, just a quick note.
Oh, of course we had that.
The coach and the general manager of the Edmonton Elks sent packing. You and I both at the game on Sunday.
Of course.
You were working a little harder than I was as the official DJ of the Edmonton Elks, but we were there as a family in the stands. Hell of a game. The Elks, it came right down to the wire. They almost kind of sort of pulled it off until they didn't.
Have been a lot of close games this year. A lot of 2-point, 3-point losses, especially I think the preseason opener there against the Riders, who, of course, the Riders are always a great team every season. So that was a close game. But, yeah, just, I work for the Elks, so I'm not going to get on here and say too much other than I think, and the organization has said this with their action, that, it was just time for a change. 4-14 2 seasons ago, 4-14 1 seasons ago. 0-5 this season. I mean, what else can you do? You have to make a coaching change at that point. Chris Jones, a big guy on the defensive side. And I honestly, I'll give him a pat on the back. I think the defense on the Elks has improved, and you can see that from these close games. I mean, they're not getting blown out this season by, 14, 21 points. They're all 1, 2, 3-point games, but that still shows that, there has to be a little tweak here. There has to be something, and 3 seasons or 2.5 or 2 and a bit here is long enough to kind of see that, and the head coach is always the first to go, right?
Yeah. Cam in a pizzeria, who's in the live chat, says the Elks need private ownership ASAP. Depending on who you talk to and the rumblings, I mean, there's some reporting.
One of the best things I like about the Elks.
Oh, but they are getting sold. That's I'm quite certain that's a fact.
Well, we'll see.
You like my confidence? I'm quite certain. I'm quite certain that's a fact. That's like I believe that I said something on the show last week that was along the lines of that is definitely probably going to happen. So these are my lukewarm and tepid takes, but you hear rumors that of at least 3 different ownership bids, and I don't want to start
Ryan Reynolds. No,
wouldn't that be incredible?
Wow,
wouldn't that be absolutely amazing? Why doesn't Nathan Fillion come back and buy the Elks?
I know Ryan Reynolds was in the conversation for the Ottawa Senators at some point. Like he owns that soccer team now. He's got that
Wrexham.
He wants to be more into sports. So
yeah. But there's
I'm just joking though.
Yeah, there's an obvious play. There's an obvious play for the Cates Group to purchase. I think because that's one of the only reasons why it would make sense for them to build, a 25 to 30,000 seat stadium north of Rogers Place. That ultimately, I think they have eyes on bringing professional soccer to that stadium. If you're going to do that, you're not going to do it without having an anchor tenant like the Edmonton Elks. And as we saw with the Rush, with the lacrosse team,
the Rush were so popular.
Cates, well, I mean,
such a great show.
They left to Saskatoon like the day after winning the championship, which was such a strange situation. But the ownership group at that time was having a hard time playing nice, or vice versa with Cates Group, and so they didn't have an arena guarantee coming to the new arena. And so I think it was Bruce Urban was his name at the time, was forced, so they say, to move the team there. So you have to assume the Cates Group would have interest in the Elks. There's a couple other families, a prominent family that made a fortune in construction that's rumored to be purchasing the Elks, and then a third player as well. But I'm certainly not going to pretend like I'm in the know or behind the scenes. I do think that private ownership could change. I mean, people are critical of the Elks board. People are critical of the way that it's run, where people don't quite understand how the structure works as a community-owned team. There are shareholders, and you have to sort of be invited to hold a share, and it's kind of a strange way of doing things. You also have to imagine at this point that the value would be deflated more than it's ever been for a team that was one of the elite, one of the toast of the town, one of the top shelf franchises in the Canadian Football League for decades and decades and decades, right? 14 Grey Cups, I think, off the top of my head.
2015 we
Five
won.
in a
It
row.
wasn't that long ago.
Right?
Yeah.
And some of the great all-time CFLers, but right now I don't know what the value of that team would look like. But I will say this. Can I just say this as a compliment to you?
It.
I would say
well,
that
let me
our
say this
experience-
before, because I know what you're going to say. So
you?
I will say I'm not going to comment on any of that.
How do you know what I'm going to say?
I love to comment on everything on the show, but I work closely with the Oilers. I work closely with the Elks.
Be careful.
The one thing I will say is that, and I know you're going to go there right now, man, is the production team ever given it a go these last 2 or 3 seasons. You were at the game this weekend on Sunday. Like, they are giving it their all, even though the performance and the wins aren't there. You were there. You're seeing what they're trying to do. Yeah. And the fans who are there are reciprocating. They are starting to like it. Of course, they're not happy with the performance of the team, but it's not for a lack of trying on the side of production and everything that goes on inside Commonwealth.
Winning goes a long way in bringing fans back as well.
But you had fun, right?
I did.
And it was like...
I was just going to tell you all
Dinosaur
about it, but then you just
Day.
said it
They've
all.
got the cheerleaders in the dinosaur costumes. It
was a fun game.
I was laughing my ass off, and I knew it was coming.
Jillian says the Elks need to do more to attract women to games. They need some serious ladies' night. Replace the cheerleaders with Magic Mike type guys for a few games. Let's party.
What is this?
Jillian, I absolutely love it. And when we buy the Edmonton Elks, you are hired as Senior VP of Marketing and Promotion.
Crazy.
That's
the whole game
fantastic.
is Magic Mike. It's all good-looking guys in tight pants running around the whole time.
Yeah, that is true. You're
we
not
don't
wrong.
Need more of that.
Maybe you just need to point that out more frequently.
Okay. More butt shots.
Well, CFL used to have the "Our Balls Are Bigger" campaign. Maybe they need to have the "Our Pants Are Tighter."
No, all you need is good performance. I mean, same thing with the Oilers. They Rich Meyer's a good friend of ours when they brought him in to kind of elevate the production when they went from Rexall to Rogers. It did not matter when the team was losing. As soon as you start to win, none of that matters. It adds to it. It's a little, it's a little bam. It's a little sprinkle of sauce on top. But as soon as the team starts to win, you saw this year with the Oilers. The production's great, but nobody cares. As long as you've got wins, everything else will fall into place. So with Chris Jones leaving, there had to be a change, and I wish the Elks the best. I love the Elks. Man, I'm out there at those games. I love CFL football. I do love it. And people in the chat are making fun of it right now, and goddamn Harmon saying the CFL was doomed. I'm sitting here biting my tongue behind him. I love CFL football. I think it's great entertainment.
Yeah. They've got to, like, and Jillian talks about they need to have ladies' nights and stuff like that. I mean, you need to do everything. You need to have the kids there. You need to have kids that are 3 and 4 and 5 years old catching little mini footballs in the stands.
Hard. It's harder than hockey.
They grow up.
A lot of families there.
Because then, like the 5-year-old becomes the 15-year-old that when they're allowed to go out on their own without their parents.
Of course.
They take transit down to the game, and they all go to the game together. And then at 25, they're there with their friends, and maybe they go to a game as part of their stag or whatever. Work with me here. And then at 35, they buy their first season seats, and then they bring their kids, and like that's sort of how it has to happen. But once you start talking about like a generational recovery, because what would you? I mean, honestly, in the stands on Sunday, like, did they announce attendance? I mean, I'm going to guess it was approximately 8,000 to 10,000 ish, approximately, and it's a tough look in a stadium that seats 68,000, right?
But I will say for you, you're awesome. I was just thinking of Wyatt right now. He's going to grow up your son with these men. You support every god-darn team in the city. I see this guy at the Elks games.
Try to.
I'm doing the Stingers game the other week. He's there. He's at the Oilers games.
Love it.
Yeah, you're there.
Love it. Absolutely. Cam and a Pizzeria also pointing out the Edmonton Riverhawks
Why
are
do you
taking.
say that?
Well, it's just fun to say. And Cam and I have been messing around and having fun on live chats and text lines for years and years. A longtime audience member, and Cam, we really appreciate him.
Riverhawks game's getting better too.
A pizza entrepreneur out of beautiful Leduc, Alberta. But he says Riverhawks taking a big bite out of the summer sports market. I know we're getting local here in our talk, but like
good production on their games.
There is a rumor as well.
Year.
I mean, Dr. Randy Gregg, former Edmonton Oiler who owns the Riverhawks, there is some talk that he could be in the mix on Elks ownership as well. I saw him just the other day, as a matter of fact. I want to give Randy Gregg credit for something. So we're at a Riverhawks game. This is a couple weeks ago. It's an afternoon game. And you know what I see him doing? You know where I ran into him? Right as the game wraps, and they had like buses outside, and some of the kids were there. It was like a school trip or something. They were watching the game. It was a matinee game, and people are sort of streaming out to the parking lots or to make their way out. The stadium is just in the coolest location in all Remax Field. It's just looking upon the Alberta legislature. It's just like the most amazing.
It's a great
location for a ballpark. You know what Randy Gregg was out there doing? The owner of the team was out there with a roller cart, helping like move some of the stuff around, helping his staff to better flow.
I love to see it.
The pedestrian traffic out, and I thought that is a guy that understands kind of what it's going to take to make this work. Like when you see the owner of the team,
100%,
who's outside pushing a wheeled cart around, moving stuff around. I thought I didn't know that I was going to share that on the show, but I was really impressed by that.
Of course, I'm not speaking about anyone specifically here, but I don't like owners. Not I don't like, but I don't like the veil. I don't like the wizard behind the curtain. I want to see the owner. I want to see him in the box, the stands. I want to see him in the moss pit. I want to see him in Commonwealth.
You like the Mark Cuban style of ownership.
I love it. I love when they're involved, when they're in the community, when they're wearing a T-shirt.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Keeping it real.
Yeah.
Before we go, I wanted to let you know, we always like to kind of give you a heads up on stuff that's coming up on Wednesday's episode of Real Talk. This is going to be the 17th. We're not wrapping just quite yet, Johnny, but coming up in a second, we're going to be sitting down with Dr. Paul Parks, who's the president of the Alberta Medical Association. There's about a million things to talk about. I thought it was interesting on our Naheed Nenshi Fact Check episode last week. We had Cynthia Moore, former president of the UCP, talking about how EMS service has greatly improved over the past while, and that's not exactly aligning with some of the stuff that I've been hearing out of the medical community. So we're going to ask Dr. Parks about that. Plus, I'm going to ask him straight up what he makes of some of the opinions, some of the musings that we made on the show last week, including, but not limited to, other avenues, alternative avenues of healthcare delivery, things like hip and knee replacements, cancer treatments, things that Canadians are paying out of pocket to fly internationally to procure. And I'm expecting a good conversation with Dr. Parks. Brock wrote in after last week's episode, and he said, Jespo, I'm with you on the healthcare file. Said it makes no sense to me to be held hostage to the Canada Health Act if we as a country and a province cannot act. And while there's no excuse for how bad our healthcare has gotten, or maybe has always been, let's be honest, there is zero logical reason why we should have to travel outside of the province or the country to pay out of pocket if that's what we have to do to keep our family and friends alive. Brock says, on a personal note, my dad found out he had stage 3 pancreatic cancer, but only because he paid to have an MRI done in Alberta in August of last year. If he had waited, he would have had his scan done in December, likely bumping him to stage 4. He got his surgery. He's completed chemo and radiation, and hopefully, and Brock, our thoughts and hopes are with you. He says, hopefully my dad's bought himself some more good years, but only because he decided to pay. Unfortunately, his surgery was pushed out 3 months after diagnosis. Having come into a recent inheritance with his dad passing, I'm sure he would have moved that surgery date up in an instant to get it done here in Calgary. Now, I'm not sure that the people talking to you in the land of Twitter get the reality when death stares you in the face if you don't do anything. We should have the capacity as Canadians to choose to want to pay if we have the means to do so. It would keep doctors in Canada. It would keep taxes paid while at the same time ensuring we have the same system we have in place for those that are okay waiting a little longer. He says you're touching on a subject that Canadians dearly need to think about. That from Brock down in Calgary. Now, I know that not everybody agrees, and we want to make sure that we're sharing different perspectives coming from places of personal experience and sincerity, like where Brock and his dad are coming from. If your view aligns with this, if you have a story that compares to this, as we say goodbye to you today, we want to remind you and encourage you that we do want to know what you think about what you're hearing here on the show. We do want to infuse your opinion, your informed opinion, into the future conversations that we have on this platform. You can reach us on email, talk@ryanjespersen.com. You can hit us on our social channels, or feel free to leave a comment on a YouTube episode. Thanks to those of you that subscribe there. 15,000 Real Talkers and counting. Dr. Paul Parks from the AMA joining us tomorrow. We'll see you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.